I came home early from a business trip to surprise my husband. As I opened the bedroom door, I froze. My husband was in bed with my boss. She smirked, "You weren't supposed to see this." He shrugged, "It's over. I've moved on." My hands shook, but then I smiled. "Good. You just saved me the trouble." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. "This is your resignation letter." "And yours," I said, handing one to my boss. Their faces turned white as I revealed who had just taken over the company. "I'm a 42-year-old female. My now ex-husband, Mark, 45 male, and I had been together for 18 years. Married for 15. 2 kids, 1 house in the Bay Area, 1 dog. You know the type of life where it looks put together on the outside? That was us. I work in tech, surprise, I know, senior management, and have been grinding it out for years. He's a freelance graphic designer, works from home. At least, that's what I thought. A few weeks ago, I had a work trip scheduled in New York. My boss, Olivia, 38F, was also there. She's the VP. We were attending a conference together, and everything seemed normal. She was her usual sharp, polished, overly charming self. She always kind of rubbed me the wrong way, but I respected her work ethic. We weren't friends, but we got along. The trip was supposed to last Monday through Friday. But the final panel on Wednesday got cancelled. I didn't tell anyone, not even Mark. I thought I'd do something sweet, fly back early, surprise him, maybe get some time alone together before the chaos of home life kicked back in. So I got a red eye, landed around 8 p.m., grabbed a lift, and headed straight home. The house was dark when I got there. Not pitch black, just dim like someone left one light on in the hallway. I figured Mark had put the kids to bed early and was maybe watching TV or working. That's when I noticed it. A wine glass, 2 of them, actually, on the coffee table. One still half full. The kind we only use when we have company. My stomach dropped a little, but I wasn't jumping to conclusions yet. I walked slowly upstairs. That's when I saw the heel. A single, black stiletto near our bedroom door. My heart started pounding. I pushed the door open and what I saw next still replays in my mind on a loop. Mark. Naked. In our bed. With Olivia. Also naked. Laughing about something until their eyes met mine. They both froze. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't say a word at first. Olivia was the first to speak. She didn't even flinch. "You weren't supposed to see this," she said. Like I walked in on them having coffee or something. Mark sat up. Didn't even bother covering himself. He looked at me, shrugged, and said, "It's over. I've moved on." Like that. Just flat. No emotion. Like I was the inconvenience here. I could feel my hands shaking. I stood there for what felt like an hour but was probably 10 seconds. Then I remembered what was in my carry-on. I smiled. Reached into my bag. Pulled out a manila folder. "Good," I said. "You just saved me the trouble." I walked over to Olivia, who was now trying to gather her clothes. I handed her the envelope. "This is your resignation letter." She laughed, like I was joking. I wasn't. Then I turned to Mark and handed him his. "And this is yours." He blinked. "What the hell is this?" "That's a resignation too. From my life." They both started talking over each other, voices getting louder, confused, panicking. So I spelled it out. "As of this morning," I said, "I officially own controlling interest in the company. Olivia, you're done. You'll be hearing from HR tomorrow. Mark, our prenup. Remember? Clause 7. Infidelity voids any claim to joint assets. That includes the house." Now that got a reaction. Mark stood up, wrapped in a sheet, like suddenly modesty mattered. "You can't do this." "Already did." He looked like he was going to argue more, but Olivia stopped him. She was pale. She understood. You set us up, she hissed. I laughed. You set yourselves up. The thing is, I didn't know it was Olivia. I had suspicions, sure. Mark had been distant. Weird. Got defensive about his phone. I thought maybe he was just stressed or depressed. I even suggested therapy. But he always brushed it off. Said I was imagining things. So I started paying attention. Quietly. Logged into our shared tablet where he was dumb enough to stay signed into Google. Tracked receipts. Caught late-night Lyft rides. Hotel stays. Expensive meals when I was out of town. And I waited. I wanted proof. I never thought the proof would walk into my bed. After the confrontation, I left the room, went straight to the guest room, locked the door, and slept with one eye open. I didn't cry that night. I just lay there, wide awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning. Thinking about every little sign I ignored. Every lie I swallowed to keep the peace. The next day, I called my lawyer. We'd already gone over the prenup months earlier when I first got suspicious. She was ready. Everything moved fast. Divorce papers were filed that week. HR launched a formal complaint against Olivia for breach of ethics. Her exit was silent but not clean. Word got around. After that night, everything moved fast, but somehow, not fast enough. Every time I walked past a mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked like someone who'd been hit by a truck and was still standing out of spite. The kids were still asleep the next morning when I made coffee. Mark came downstairs wearing the same shirt he wore when we first met. I don't know if it was a guilt move or nostalgia, but either way, I didn't care. He sat across from me in the kitchen like nothing had happened. No apology. No explanation. You really gonna destroy my life over one mistake? He asked, sipping from my favorite mug. One. I said. Don't insult me. I've seen the receipts. He flinched. That's when I knew Olivia wasn't the first. Just the one dumb enough to get caught in my house. You planned this, he mumbled. No, Mark. You planned it the moment you invited my boss into my bed. He left the house later that day. Took a duffel bag and his MacBook. Said he'd stay at a friend's place. Didn't tell me who. I didn't ask. I didn't care. That weekend, I sat the kids down. Told them Daddy was going to live somewhere else for a while. I didn't say why. Just said we were working through some grown-up stuff. My oldest, Jonah, is 12. He didn't ask any questions. He just nodded like he already knew something was wrong. Then came the part one didn't expect. Monday morning. First day back at work. Everyone acted weird. People avoided eye contact. Whispers followed me down the hallway. One in turn, bless her heart, looked like she was about to cry when I walked by. I didn't get it, until I got to my office and found a printed email waiting on my desk. It was from Olivia. Sent the night after I walked in on them. BCC'd to half the leadership team. In it, she painted me as a jealous, unstable woman who overstepped her authority, abused her new power, and fired a top-performing VP over a personal matter. She claimed I violated HR policy and that she feared retaliation. I read it 3 times before I laughed. Loud. Crazy, echoing laugh. The kind you laugh when something breaks inside you, but it's the last thing holding you together. She was trying to flip the narrative. And in Silicon Valley, perception is currency. I wasn't just battling a cheater now. I was battling a professional smear campaign. I called an emergency meeting with legal and HR. They were already one step ahead. Turns out Olivia wasn't as smart as she thought. She left her work laptop unlocked when she fled my house. Guess what was still open? Her private Slack messages with Mark. They'd been talking for months, longer than I realized. Not just about sleeping together. But about me. They talked about how to push me out. How to frame me as too emotional, overworked, paranoid. There were jokes about my age. My parenting. My looks. Some messages even mentioned passwords. Accounts. Access to company data. It wasn't just cheating. It was betrayal on a whole other level. My stomach turned as I read every word. But it also made things clear. I filed for a formal investigation through our compliance team. Froze her accounts. Called a board meeting. One of the board members, Greg, had known me since I joined the company. He looked furious after I laid out the evidence. She messed with the wrong person, he said. And he was right. But just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I got a call from my sister. You need to check Mark's Instagram. I hadn't. I'd been avoiding social media like it was poison. But I opened it, hands shaking again. And there it was. A photo. Mark and Olivia. Smiling. In a hotel suite. Her head on his shoulder. The caption? Finally free to love who we want. Over 300 likes. Heart emojis. A few "you guys are brave" comments. Brave? They were acting like I was the villain. That's when I realized they were trying to rewrite the story. They wanted me to break down. To fall apart. To quit. And honestly? For a second, I almost did. But I didn't. Because I still had my kids. I still had the company. And I still had the truth. And now, I had one more reason to fight. I wasn't going to let the two people who shattered everything I built walk away clean. There's more. It gets worse. Twists I didn't expect. But I'll stop here for now. So, where was I? Oh, right. Olivia and Mark posted that little "we're in love" photo like they were the main characters in some tragic romance. Meanwhile, I'm over here trying to hold my life together with legal tape and caffeine. After the Slack messages came out, Olivia's goose was cooked professionally. HR processed her resignation under ethics breach and misconduct. It was quiet but final. Mark, on the other hand, was still freeloading off the sympathy of mutual friends, trying to make it look like I was the villain. Word spread fast in the Bay. And guess what? There were people willing to believe him. He said you were cold. He said you worked too much. He said you emasculated him. He said. And the worst part? Some of it did hurt. I did work a lot. I did stop noticing him in ways that matter in a marriage. But none of that gave him the right to screw my boss in our bed while our kids were asleep down the hall. Anyway, I stayed quiet. I kept my head down. Until I got a letter in the mail. No return address. It was a printed photo. Olivia. Mark. And someone I didn't recognize at first, until I did. It was my assistant. Julia. In the background. Behind them. In a cafe. And she wasn't just there. She was laughing with them. Holding a tablet. My blood ran cold. Julia had been with me for over 2 years. She knew my schedule. My passwords. My weak points. She ordered my lunches, scheduled my meetings, even watched my kids once when I got stuck in traffic. And now, there she was, chumming it up with the two people who tried to ruin me. I dug deeper. I started checking access logs. Email traces. Device sign-ins. And wouldn't you know it? My calendar had been mirrored to another device. Her device. Which explained why Olivia always seemed to bump into me during key meetings. Why Mark had time to sneak around without me knowing. Julia was feeding them info. Helping them plan. I wanted to scream. But instead, I documented everything. Quietly. Collected screenshots. Timestamped files. Pulled security footage from the office cafe showing her handing a flash drive to someone who looked suspiciously like Olivia's cousin, who worked in IT. Then I handed it all to the company's general counsel. It was a coordinated hit job. A slow, steady backstab over months. Maybe even longer. And I was too busy juggling everything, kids, work, stress, to see it. They wanted to push me out. Tank my reputation. Make me snap so I'd resign and they could take over. But they got sloppy. Arrogant. Turns out, Julia had been quietly promised a promotion to executive assistant to the new CEO, Olivia, if they managed to replace me. Olivia had been planning a takeover. And Mark? He was supposed to ride that gravy train as Olivia's supportive arm candy and somehow still share custody of our kids like nothing happened. Sick. I confronted Julia in the office. Her face went ghost white when she saw me holding the printed photos and logs. I can explain, she said. You can explain it to security, I replied. She was gone by lunch. The board was stunned. A mole inside my own office. A personal betrayal and a professional one. Everything was unraveling, and not the way Olivia or Mark wanted it to. But then, just as I thought the storm was over, another wave hit. I got an alert from my bank. Mark tried to access our joint savings account. The one I had frozen after filing the divorce papers. And not just that, he tried 3 times. Then he called my bank, pretended to be me. Used my old PIN. The name of our dog as my password hint. I reported it immediately. It triggered a fraud investigation. He had no idea I'd already changed everything, passwords, PINs, emergency contacts. I'd even taken his name off as a beneficiary. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He laughed. I deserve something for putting up with you all these years. I lost it. I told him he could deserve a prison cell, because at this point, he was digging his own grave financially and legally. My lawyer added attempted financial fraud to the divorce proceedings. It was official, he wasn't just a cheater. He was a full-blown con man in a hoodie. So now? Mark's broke. Olivia's blacklisted. Julia? No one's hiring her. But it's not over. There's still more fallout. Still more to tell. Including one message I found that shook me harder than all the others. Want me to share it? It all came to a head 2 weeks later. HR had quietly pushed Olivia out. Julia was gone. Mark was trying to play the victim, telling people I was ruining his life, taking his kids, leaving him with nothing. But I didn't care what he said anymore, until I got invited to a company dinner. It was a formal event. Company sponsors, partners, and a few board members were attending. I didn't want to go at first. I was still bruised, still tired. But I needed to show up. To remind everyone that I was still standing. Still leading. So I did. Black suit. No makeup. Just bold red lipstick and quiet rage. What I didn't expect. Mark and Olivia showing up uninvited. Apparently, Olivia RSVP'd before she resigned. And Mark? He came as her plus one. The second I saw them walk into that room, my chest tightened. Olivia in a sleek navy dress. Mark in the blazer I bought him for our 10th anniversary. They acted like nothing had happened. Laughing. Mingling. Until they reached my table. Olivia leaned in and whispered, "You can't erase me." I stared at her. I was done whispering. I stood. Glass in hand. Calm as a lake before the storm. I tapped my fork against the side. People turned to look. "I know some of you might be wondering what's been going on," I said. Why a vice president vanished overnight? Why a few emails mysteriously stopped being returned? Mark's smile dropped. I didn't want to bring personal business into a professional space, but since we have uninvited guests tonight, I turned to Olivia and Mark, "I'd like to clear the air." Silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Olivia slept with my husband. In my home. In my bed. While I was at a conference with her. That's not gossip. That's fact. Olivia stepped back, face white. Mark muttered, "You're embarrassing yourself." I looked at him, dead in the eye. You embarrassed yourself when you started plotting against the mother of your kids for a side piece with a LinkedIn addiction. Someone gasped. I turned back to the room. And if anyone here has questions about the investigation, yes, there was one. And yes, it proved everything. Corporate espionage. Coordinated harassment. Even an attempt to access my private financial accounts. The full report is available to the board. People started whispering. One guy from finance stood up and walked away. Couldn't even look at Olivia. I didn't stop. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because I won't be bullied into silence. Not at home. Not at work. And not by two people who have nothing left to lose. Mark shouted, "You always have to make yourself the hero." I turned and finally let it out. No, Mark. I was the wife. I was the one keeping this house together. You were just occupying space. You needed someone to blame because you hate the man you've become. That hit. He flinched. For the first time in this whole thing, he actually looked ashamed. He grabbed Olivia's hand and stormed out. And just like that, the room exhaled. People clapped. Not loud. Not for show. Just slow, steady claps of support. My CTO came over, patted me on the back. A junior dev whispered, "You didn't have to say all that, but thank you for saying it." The next day, I got an email from Mark. A single sentence, "I'm sorry for everything. You were right. No excuses. No explanations." I didn't reply. Olivia? Never heard from her again. Word is, she moved to LA and tried starting a consultancy. No one bit. Her name's mud in the industry now. Julia sent me a long email a week later. Apologies, excuses, begging for another chance. I didn't reply to her either. My kids? They knew something was off, but I kept it honest. I told them people make mistakes. That daddy made a big one. That we'd be okay, even if we weren't all in the same house anymore. Jonah asked me, "Are you sad?" I thought about it. Sometimes, I told him. But not as much as I thought I'd be. Because the truth is, I was free. Free from walking on eggshells. Free from wondering why I was never enough. Free from thinking that love means sacrificing your self-respect. The divorce finalized quietly. Clean break. I kept the house. Full custody with visitation. He didn't fight it. And the company? Stronger than ever. We recovered. Rebuilt. Hired new leadership with actual ethics. For once, the rumors helped. People respected me more for standing up. It wasn't the life I planned. But it's mine now. If you're still reading this, here's what I've learned: sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you is the thing that saves you. I lost a marriage. But I found peace. And that's worth everything.